Hello. Hello, chick. Hello. 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 Good afternoon. Um, can we all settle down so we can start on time and finish on time? Thank you for coming in on a Saturday afternoon. Much appreciated. My name is Ravi Miglani, and I'm a professor at the Amrit Modi School of Management in Ahmedabad University. And we, of course, have many of our students and colleagues here who hopefully would know me. But for the benefit of our visitors from Seva and Imago and other organizations, welcome to Ahmedabad University. And this is a series of talks that we do occasionally, not as frequently as we would like to do. This is called the Conversation Series, in which we invite speakers who are deep thinkers, academics, business practitioners, and they come and have a informal chat in this setting with one of our professors, and good ideas come out of those talks, and hopefully some way, in a little way, they impact the world in a better way. So that is the purpose of these talks, and we always seek out insightful, deep thinkers. And we have one such amazing thinker and writer and development expert, Isabel Guerrero. We will get to Isabel Ben in a short while. But before that, we have very esteemed people from Seva, and they can introduce the topic and introduce Isabel in a much more competent way than I can. So I will first invite Rimaben Nanavati. Rimaben, as almost all of us know, is the director, leader of SEWA, which is the Self-Employed Women's Association. She's been leading the organization for several decades, and you have grown across several states in the country and beyond the country, and I believe you have more than 2 million women entrepreneurs as members. But all of that, Rimaben can explain better than me. So Rimaben, please.
Namaste. Namaste. Thank you. It's been a real honor and a privilege today to be here. And Professor Ravi, we consider Ahmedabad University as our university. And therefore, we rightfully thought that how if we requested Ahmedabad University to host the event of today. And as you rightly said, Isabel, definitely that your conversation series is with people who are deep thinkers and intellectuals and practitioners and business entrepreneurs, and Isabel represents all of that. So it's a very appropriate event that you also decided to have it. So I'll start by not talking much about SEWA today because it's the day for Isabel and her two co-authors who are also here, Josie and Siddhant Bhai as well. So, but I would like to start by sharing our families bonding and experience with Isabel. We see her as a part of our family as well because it's over 15 years of bonding that we have with Isabel and Michael, by whom we are missing today. He's not here. Isabel was the country director based out of Delhi as well. And as the country director of the World Bank, she visited SEWA several times because she had this deep hunger to study the different kinds of women workers who were there. So maybe it's the salt pan workers, the artisans, the weavers, the small farmers, the agriculture workers. And I think she always took what she really learned from the lives and the work of these members. And it was the same that every visit to Delhi was incomplete if we did not meet Isabel either at her home, which was lovely on the Lodi Road, or in her office at the World Bank. So Isabel has been having years of experience at the World Bank and now at the Kennedy School at Harvard. But I would like to say that she's a people's person and her heart is amongst the people. Very few people know that she also has a deep love for art. And so that's where her creativity, the whole deep, bonding on co-creation comes from. Something that I learned in my very early times with Isabel, she was the vice president for South Asia. And, she changed the entire approach to working within the World Bank, that if you are looking after the region, why don't you base yourselves in the region? So all her practice managers moved to the region and they worked out of there. And that's how she brought about decentralization within a very centralized bureaucratic structure like the World Bank. And from thereon, I think my admiration for Isabel, or our admiration for Isabel, became more and more deeper. And as the vice president of World Bank, she was visiting Seva and then our family. We played Holi together. And it was in March of that year when she asked Ilaben that, what is it that we think is most important for the region that needs to be done? And Ilaben shared with Isabel that it is regional integration, and regional integration will be at its best only when we elevate the collective strength of the women in the region, especially the women workers in the region. And I think it did not take even a second thinking for Isabel, and she initiated the first ever South Asia Women's Enterprise Network, which is known as BEES, the Business Enterprise and Employment Support for Women in South Asia, which is a strong, thriving network today of women's enterprises and entrepreneurs in the region, including even Afghanistan. So I think in all these years of, macro level experience that Isabel had, but I think her heart was, and she realized that the real impact comes from the grassroots. If you are closer to them, and the organizations that are rooted in the communities demonstrate high impact. But she also realized that, those organizations have difficulty in scaling up because, they have worked at scale while we work at micro aspects as well. So Isabel herself, therefore, went and met with leaders who had taken their organizations to scale. Sarabi, that BRAC, Mohammed, she had long discussions with Ilaben and others as well. And she realized that what would need for scaling up, and we all should read her book. I will not be talking on her book because I'm no master on scaling up, but Isabel is. But is how do you strike a balance? How do you blend development with business? How do you bring systems and processes that are people driven and not, processes which are only system driven? How do you build entrepreneurial skills amongst the workers in the organizations? What is the role of data, the management information systems? How does a boardroom function? How do you manage stress when you are multitasking and you are scaling up, which we all are experiencing every minute? And I think it's Isabel's great creativity, that without even we realize that, all this has started happening. Isabel, with her very great team of Michael Bai and Zachary Bai, co-created with us our manager school, our Rudy, our Hansiba, the Trade Facilitation Center, our district federations and associations. The whole approach of how do you bring balance between all these things? How do you manage multitasking, the stress, identifying opportunities, identifying leaders? How do you let go things? What are the characteristics that are needed for an organization to scale up? And I think her best was that she brought my older son in, who's the most difficult to be brought in designing the logo of Imago. And I think the first design was done by Somnath, my older son, and then it was refined by Isabel with one of our very well-known designers of the country, which is in itself that, when from a cocoon, a moth starts flying, you don't even realize, and it starts flying. And that is what Imago's real characteristic is, that it makes you learn to fly high and fly far. So in the end, I will like to conclude by saying that Ahmedabad University, Professor Miglani, Professor Tanab, and Parag Bhai, Siddharth Bhai, we are very, very grateful that, you were organizing this event here. But I also hope that the AU faculty teaches the ideas from Isabel Joshi and Siddhant Bai's book, because these are real examples. It's not something theoretical. And the students learn and practice it together with poor women and their enterprises, organizations like ours, and you have root camps which are happening. So I think that's the best way where you can put it into practice. Then only I think the objective of today's event would be served, and also of this book that Isabel has written would serve, and us launching it together, bringing it to Ahmedabad and to Gujarat and to India and to many more universities. And for Seva also it would serve the purpose that we get the inputs from faculty, esteemed faculty of yours, and very bright and intelligent students. Otherwise, Seva doesn't launch books, but this was a special book. And equally important will be a message from millions of women workers like Seva members from India and the Global South. Isabel Ben, you did, give this book to us on upscaling and wide scaling. But important is who does that? Who does the upscaling, the wide scaling? Which are the women workers who are involved in scaling up things? How are they doing it? And you being also an anthropologist, I would urge that, the kind of leadership these grassroots women demonstrate is the real leadership that's required for scaling up. And I do not mean the conventional leadership. As Ilaben always told us that जो दूसरों को आगे करे वही आगेवान कहलाता है. The one who allows others to lead is the real leader. And therefore, I think, do keenly observe these women and study their leadership skills and approaches. And next time we come together in the same room under the same team, and Isabel Ben, you will give us another book, which will be that how these grassroots women are scaling up. What are the leadership qualities? Because I think current times require at a global level, the true leadership skills and capabilities that one needs. Everything else is incomplete, what we do, if we do not understand the values and principles that a real leadership has to imbibe and also demonstrate. So I'm really very, very grateful again to Ahmedabad University, to Professor Pankaj Chandra, who without even blinking his eyes said, yeah, we will definitely do that. Unfortunately, we miss him today. To Professor Ravi Miglani, to Parag Bhai, and to Professor Tana Trivedi for organizing this event, giving us all this opportunity. And congratulations to you, Isabel Ben, really a wonderful thing. To Joshi Ben and to Siddhant Bhai, at such a young age to bringing out a book, and that too with somebody like Isabel, I know what it means. So very, very warm congratulations from all of us here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rima Ben. Wow, now you know why we invited Rima Ben to introduce the topic and to introduce Isabel. She brought her to life for us. I could have read Isabel's bio from a piece of paper, but the way you described the relationship between Isabel and the whole sector and Seva was amazing. So now, obviously, you are keen to listen to Isabel and not to me. So I'll invite Isabel to have a conversation. She will be in conversation with our very own Professor Tana Trivedi, who needs no introduction to this audience. Sorry, you're saying something? Yeah, okay. Isabel and Tana, please join us on stage. Okay, I see a lot of students and I see a lot of MBA students here. Please listen carefully. There is a lot of learning. So while we are largely talking about scaling up in development organizations, but Isabel's ideas on scaling up apply to all walks of life and all kinds of enterprises and businesses. So whether you're going to be working in MSMEs or larger organizations or setting up your own organizations, I would urge the students to listen carefully, think of what you want to clarify. At the end of the conversation, we will have a question and answer round. I'll expect a lot of questions from our students, and Isabel will patiently answer your questions. So please be prepared with questions. We'll come to you. So over to Isabel and Tana.
Thank you so much, Professor Meglani. It's an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, do you want to check if it's working?
Is this working?
Yeah, it's working. Okay. All right. No, so I believe we're anyway running a few minutes behind, so I'm going to go straight into our conversation. And I'll begin with a very obvious question, asking you, what motivated you to write this absolutely wonderful book? If you can run us through it.
Yeah, I had been teaching this course on scaling up for 9 years in the Harvard Kennedy School, and I was approached by an editor or a publisher to see whether we wanted to make it a textbook. And so I thought, yes, it's about time. 9 years teaching a course, it will be easy. Far from the truth, it wasn't that easy. But we realized that we needed to do it the Imago way, and not do it with a publisher where the price of the book would be very expensive, but self-publish it ourselves. And then I also realized that we needed to include a lot of the stories and experience of Imago with organizations like SEWA, and so I invited Josie and Sid to be part of the team, and as a team we worked for a year and wrote this book.
Fantastic. So I believe it's an amalgamation of many years of your experience.
Yes.
Working in this field of development and scaling up.
Most of it, the last part is written by Sid, which is the part on how does an evaluation accompany a process of scaling up. That I never thought. That's purely his material.
Right, yeah, please welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Right. Yeah, no, so how long did it take for you to, just put everything together? And 9 years is what?
1 year to write the book.
Sure.
And yes, 9 years. So when I started, I knew how to work at scale, at very large scale. I managed a portfolio of $36 billion, so very big, but I didn't know how to get to scale.
Sure.
So the course, when you teach a course from scratch, it helps you learn a lot.
Right.
So I asked, could I teach this course? Nobody was teaching it, and so I started it from scratch and learned a lot on the way, both about the framework that I was using, the students, whether it was clear. In the beginning, I had too many frameworks, eventually realized that I had to simplify. And then the lived experience of 10 years of working with grassroots organizations and social enterprises enriched this framework and made me see where it was working, where it was not, where we needed to bring other tools. And so in the end, it's integrating both.
Right. So really it is an integration of a lot of different experiences, including that of being an educator, also being in classrooms, isn't it, in that sense? Right.
And usually when you start to get into development, it's such a complex reality that you need a framework.
Right.
You need something simple, questions that allow you to start from there and then get into the complexity. I always say you start from the simplicity, go to the complexity, and then come out with the simplicity on the other side. And I think frameworks and lived experience, that's what they give you.
Sure. Yeah, no, so, we were talking about scaling up just a few minutes back while I was talking to you. Would it be possible for you to, tell us stories about scaling up and tell us what it actually means when we say scaling up, especially because it's a relatively newer terminology, not that it did not exist, but it's something that we now theorize. So can you just tell us a little bit about,
Yeah.
what it means, and by giving us examples of what, it actually translates into?
So scaling up started in industry many years
Sure.
ago, and it was about vertical integration and scaling production. But to development is a relatively new term. It started in the late 90s, early 2000s, the first articles. And in economics or in economic development, scaling is a completely different concept than in industry.
Right.
It's a concept of transformation. The organization that starts and the organization that scales is a different organization. And that process of transformation is what scaling up requires if you want to address something at the magnitude of what it needs. So with the Millennium Development Goals, with the Sustainable Development Goals, the scale has been defined. It's huge.
Right.
So how do
right.
you, as an organization or as a set of organizations, work towards that huge scale? How do you reach it? So it's
Right,
very
right.
different than growth. It's about the scale of the problem and having a solution that matches
Right,
the scale
right.
of that problem.
Right. So maybe growth is just a part of it.
It's part of it, but
And
you
then-
could grow and not scale.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I'm thinking of it also in context of India, because it's only post-independence that we've had so many businesses, especially post-1990s, that we've scaled, businesses have also grown so much. So I'm thinking in that context, this is a very important aspect to look at, isn't it, in terms of scaling? I mean, can you tell us some experiences of yours, especially with Imago, that you?
So I would have never gotten into scale if I had not lived in India. I realized that the scale of India was something that no other country, maybe China had, but I never worked on China. The largest country in Latin America, where I come from, Brazil, is the size of one state in India. And so in India, you had to think about scale in order to make a difference. So for me, that was, I think, probably my pull to scale. We had many loans where we were trying to solve problems where you would lend $500 million, $1 billion, but realize that from the top down, you could not solve every problem. There were some that you could, but many important ones, behavioral ones, transformative ones, could not be done from the top down. So for me, the two lessons of scale, one is, of course, SEWA and learning about the scale of the transformation of the lives of women. It's very difficult to help a woman find their leadership, and yet to do it at this scale, it's just amazing. So that's where the work with Rima Ben and the work with many others here from SEWA was so formative for me. And then in BRAC, also Rima Ben mentioned, they are the only nonprofit that has been able to really close that missing middle between the top down that does large things and the grassroots that need to scale. And they did it. I learned from them also. They did it by finding the space to really experiment and find a solution to really difficult problems. And then once you find it, to standardize the solution, to have modules, to have training, and to replicate this throughout Bangladesh. And so I think in South Asia, you have a couple of the best examples of reaching scale. And in Imago, we have been working with both.
Right. Yeah, so, so that I was just thinking about scaling up, and the kind of challenges that are there in every country would be different, right?
Yes.
I mean, like for instance, when you work with SEWA, the challenges would be very different from a country, like maybe Bangladesh, maybe to a certain extent, but that's your global south.
South Asia.
Yeah, South Asia. But I'm sure everywhere else, it'll also have many different factors that impact the scaling, right, of an organization.
Yes, including what's the ecosystem where you're scaling. Some countries realize that you need grassroots, you need civil society, you need social enterprises as part of the development tools that you need to tackle the development challenges. Other countries are very close to that. So it depends a lot on the context, whether you can really be ambitious about scale or whether you have to start to think about changing the system where you work. So one of the chapters of the book is to help understand, can you scale within the system that you're working, or do you need to change the system in order to scale?
Okay. Okay.
So the context, the system, is part of what you need to
Right.
consider as you start that journey.
Right. 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 Yes, it's very interesting actually. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So again, it's something that I'm going to just divert a little bit from talking about scaling and just ask you to tell us a little bit about the cover page here.
So where's
And I know
Devashish?
that's the part
There.
you'd like talking about.
So Devashish Datta is here from Baroda. He is the author of the painting. When I was in the World Bank, we did a competition for young artists all through South Asia. And he was one of the 2 winners for India. We had winners for Afghanistan, Pakistan, all of South Asia. And when we finished the book, the first thing that came to my mind was this painting, which had been one of the winners in this competition. And I called him and he said, of course you can use it. And it's now part of the collection of the World Bank. And then there's been a lot of talk about this journey of scaling, and I didn't remember the title, but I looked at the title and it's called The Journey. So it was a very important sort of connection between that painting and the journey of scaling and our journey in Imago of learning about scaling. Yes.
Right.
So I'm very grateful that you're here.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. When you look at the cover, like you said, it evokes all
What do
different.
you think when you see this?
Right. Yeah, the first time I looked at the cover, it just got me thinking, saying, okay, here is somebody who's wanting to join a whole lot of people, and becoming a part of a larger process or a larger group of people. To me, it also reminds, it also invokes ideas, notions of community, of people coming together, because there is no one person that stands out. In a sense, it's so many people, right? So to me, really, it does mean scaling up, but I'm sure it means differently to different people.
And the other thing that some people have said, and I really believe in it, it feels that you really have to get to the edge of your comfort zone in order to really scale, because it's a transformation, because it involves letting go, because it involves allowing what needs to emerge to emerge.
It's also a sort of a balancing act, isn't it? Because you have this,
what Rima Ben was saying, the balance between the profit and the community, the 2 sides. Yes.
Yeah. Do we have a little note that is written about the cover?
No, I think we need to write
We
one.
must
Devashish.
get some. Right. So while we were talking, you were also mentioning that you're very interested in psychology, and so where do you place your interest in psychology with in terms of this book especially? I mean, have you been able to integrate some of the elements of psychology into looking at how people scale up, or how organizations approach this idea of scaling up, and what are some of the psychological challenges or hurdles that?
So I studied economics because I thought that was the way to change the world, and then was disappointed by a lot of mistakes we made in the World Bank, thinking that there was a magic bullet, and then trained as a psychoanalyst, because then I realized that's a real transformative profession. People really can completely change their lives one at a time. And so in Imago, the work we do, and in scaling, we bring both together. We bring the economics, the business side, but also the personal transformation side that Rima Ben alluded to, the whole leadership side.
Right.
In order to be able to be a leader when you scale up an organization, it's like a tree that grows high. The roots need to be deeper and deeper for it to be stable.
Right.
And just the same as you lead, and you lead a larger and larger organization, your own self-knowledge, your own self-awareness, your own roots in practices become more and more important. And so I think as you do the work of transformation, of scaling, people who are in that organization need to do their own personal work of transformation as well.
Right. Yeah. So, I've been thinking, or I've been reading up about what the work you do, and I've also, heard you, and it makes me think whether, especially looking at it from the gender perspective, right? You work extensively with women's organizations, especially women at the grassroots level. How do they respond to scaling up versus some larger companies, largely men, driven by men at the helm? Is there a difference? Is there a considerable difference in the way that women respond to scaling up versus men? Do you see a difference there?
Very much. So I think that corporations headed by men tend to be much more top-down,
Right.
tend to be more hierarchical, and think that if you have a vision, what matters is the vision, and then everybody else has to come and implement it, which sometimes works.
Right.
But I think in the world of today, which is so complex, it's working less and less. This idea of one leader at the top that is all wise and knows where to lead is becoming more and more difficult to believe. And I think that the organizations of women, and that happened very much with SEWA, when we said Imago is the last stage of a caterpillar when it finds its wings. We're coming here to help you accelerate the process of finding your own wings. I remember the excitement of the women going like that. And I think women are much more open to co-creating.
Right.
To co-creating and to making the process of defining scale one that is more collective, that includes more views. You still need somebody to take the decision, but they're more naturally inclined to think of the team as a whole in that process of defining where you're going, and thinking, and also making sure that everybody comes along.
So taking people together and working together as a cohesive unit.
You might take more time to bring people together, but they know that you will get further.
Right. And so where does scaling up really go, right? I mean, it's just a question that comes to my mind when I say scaling up. And so where does one really stop at scaling up? In the sense, you scale up. Is it like an ongoing process, and every few years you have to take stock and then you scale up? And then how dynamic is a process, and for how long can an organization?
Many times you're not going to solve a problem alone.
Right.
If you think about the magnitude of the challenges, you really need to think about changing a system and scaling, by changing that system. So it means bringing partners along, and it ends when that goal is achieved. Depends on the goal.
Okay.
But if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, they're so massive and we're so far.
Yes.
That I don't know, if in my lifetime we're going to get there, but the scale of development challenges is so large that you need to understand as an organization, where do you want to put yourself in there, and who else needs to come along for us to get there.
Right.
So I didn't answer your question with
no.
But it finishes when the job is done, meaning
there is no exactly. And like you said, the developmental goals are like so large.
So it ends it ends when there's no more gender discrimination in the world. It ends when everybody has access to rural electricity. It ends when everybody has access to rural water, when every woman is able to read and write. That's
we have a long way to go.
That's when it ends. Yes.
Right. So does that ever make you think about how far do I have to go?
It makes me think that it's the next generation, and that's where we're trying to do in Imago. It's going to be the next generation who's going to take it. I think SEWA is thinking along the same lines, is the next generation. And so that the book is part of that. It's part of having in one place whatever we have learned over the years and having people take it from there.
Sure.
I mean, if you're a young person graduating today, it's a very difficult world. And so we are not going to solve the problems, but whatever we can do to contribute just to one way of thinking, and I'm sure, students here have many different ways of thinking, which are equally valuable, and to mix that between your new creative way of seeing the world and thinking with the knowledge that we accumulated over our own development
Yeah,
journey.
keep building on that.
And you need to keep building, it's generations.
Sure. Can you just tell us a little more about Imago and the kind of work that Imago does?
So Imago was founded 10 years ago. The first year was fully learning from SEWA and learning from BRAC. And now we work all over the world. We work in India, we work in several states. One of the beautiful projects we have is scaling up an innovation within SEWA, which is called Rudy, which has which women buy from the farmer, then have processing centers where they pack in small packages and take to the village and sell. So they've replaced the intermediaries in every level. And now that's being scaled up in 3 states, UP, MP, and Jharkhand. And if this is successful, it will go to 8 million women. So that's a beautiful
that's
project.
fantastic.
Yes. We work in Latin America, in Chile, in Peru. Now we're starting Brazil to work with also social enterprises and grassroots organizations. We work with UN Women. They are the startup of the UN.
Okay.
10 years old. So it's been an amazing journey. When I started, people say you will never be able to make this happen, but we have, and we have a wonderful team. We work in the US also with several foundations who ask us to work with their grantees.
Right.
And it's focused on scaling up and on evaluations that accompany the scaling up process.
Right. Yes, of course, you need evaluations in place to know
it's
how.
a different type of evaluation.
Right.
It's an evaluation which is much more nimble and fast, and you can get results quickly.
Right. Oh, fantastic. I'm sure it's going to do very, very well, and
Thank you.
I'm sure it'll do very well, yeah. Okay, so, a quick question, since we are also an educational institution here. Should this be made a part of the curriculum? How do you believe it should be taught in classrooms? Because, I'm sure somewhere economics does look at scaling up, but how important is it for educational institutions to start talking about scaling up?
Very important. I hope somebody is going to teach it here. It would be great. I teach it, and I get students from economics, from the education school, from the health school, from the design school. I get business students. So it has a wide appeal, and it's an elective. And so people from all over the Boston area come. And I think if somebody wants to use this to teach it here, that would be fantastic.
Of course, I mean, we can think about putting a module together and say, okay, let's look at scaling up, right? And then we work with SEWA, huh?
Yes.
Co-creation.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I really would want, the audience also to, I would want people to ask questions and have more time for them. But one of the last questions that I'm very curious about is there one particular story you want to tell us from the book that you're going to publish? I mean, when will this be published is my first question.
In a couple of weeks through Amazon.
Okay.
It will be available everywhere.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. And is there one story you would like to tell us? Something that remains very close to your heart? I'm sure all of them do. But is there anything that you would want to?
Lots of stories. I think the most important story for me was part of my own journey, being in the World Bank, really believing that economics was the magic bullet, and then working in the former Soviet Union. It was collapsing the Soviet Union, and we went there very naive and arrogant and said, you just need to get your incentives right, privatize this, privatize that, without even thinking that there was no democracy, there was no governance that could hold that. Right. And then you had all the mafias and all the problems that happened. So for me, that was a huge moment of disappointment in this magic bullet, which actually made me change completely the way that I thought. Not throwing away economics, which I think is still useful, but realizing that there were so many other disciplines that needed to come in to understand the world, and the importance of listening also to the communities, to the people, to never come in as an expert, but the experts are the people closest to the problem, and you come with a structure, you come with questions, but it is not an expert from outside that can have the answers. That's the most personal story, I think.
Right. So in that sense, you also, like you said, you pointed out, you do need a democracy, you do need stable political systems to also make this work, right?
You need checks and balances.
Yeah. So be it the smallest level of scaling up to the highest level of scaling up, you would require a stable system to function in.
And policies are not a magic bullet.
Of course.
So much more than that.
Of course, it's implementation of policies and everything with that. Right. Good. I think, I have so many things to ask you, but I think I'll also open it up. Ravi, should we ask the, but sorry, one last thing, Ravi, just before so, where does India really stand globally in terms of women in leadership positions? Is it something that you would like to talk
I don't know enough right now.
Okay.
Before I might have known, but I don't follow the politics and don't know how many politicians or anything. So I don't know.
You don't
I don't know. The world is not doing very well in terms of women leaderships. Not only in governments, but in big institutions.
We have a very long,
which is a big waste of the talent of many women.
Right.
And also, I think there's too much testosterone in the world right now, and too much aggression and war. And I think the feminine energy needs to be part of coming out of the mess that we are in right now.
Absolutely. Right.
So I can tell you generally that, but I don't know specifically.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this.
So before we open up for questions, what we were thinking was we will, to round off the whole understanding, we'll invite two other esteemed guests to say a few words. Smita Ben from Seva, and also Yamini Ben from Udayti Foundation. If you can tell us your perspective on how you work with Isabel and what does this book mean for you, then I think the audience will have a more well-rounded understanding. So either of you, Smita Ben, you want to start? Mm-hmm.
Namaste Isabel Ben, Namaste Professor Tana. Namaste everyone. So I would like to start with sharing experiences on behalf of all our Seva sisters on how Seva and Imago have worked together. I think our relationship is completing a decade. We started working in 2014, and this was the time when Seva also had a lot of younger generation members becoming members of Seva, and we were undergoing brainstorming exercises to understand the aspirations of the younger generation. And that's when Seva and Imago started working together to develop the tools, the systems, the processes to understand the mindsets of the younger generation, as well as how the experiences of our experienced members could work together. And the journey started then. And we started working together with various member-owned and managed economic organizations that have been promoted by Seva members. Rima Ben and Isabel Ben, both of you mentioned about Rudy, Seva Managini School. And I think from 2014 to 2016, we had extensive workshops on 5 major pillars. The first one, as I mentioned, was doing brainstorming between the younger generation and the experienced generation. And in the same in the process, Seva Managini school teams were also present because Imago and Seva both wanted to institutionalize the learnings. So then we could then take it up to several members across the entities we work with. And that's where the second pillar was the whole leadership building and also managing the stress levels. Rima Ben also mentioned about it. So when we scale up, a lot of change management we need to learn about. We need to learn about various growing up strategies, deal with time management, stress management. And how can we do all these in such a simple way? Since we were doing co-creation of our pedagogies, of our systems and processes, we used to get the material from Imago, we used to translate it and then share with our members. And we used to read a lot of jargons, flames, BART, and that time we were really scared. But the way these tools were used, it just drilled into our minds. We remember the clickers which had become very popular, how fearlessly we used to give our opinion. And similarly, we had all our exercises being done. Till today, we are using the tools, especially the One Breath, the World Cafe, and also the revised form of the polling. So this is how we were, because we had completed 40 years at that time. So we also wanted to do the visioning for that coming 40 years, and that's where we started working together. And very recently, just before pandemic, Imago team also introduced us to a very participatory management tool, which was the Poverty Stoplight tool. And we are right now piloting the same. So while we were working together in this journey of empowering and strengthening the livelihoods of women and our women-owned economic entities and the social enterprises, with a focus on the social enterprises. If I talk specifically about Manager School, we were in the process of growing, in the process of scaling up, and there was a lot of little bit of tension, maybe a healthy tension, but there were various exercises being done, and I can proudly say today that we have a very harmonious team working together, and with the common vision, keeping our values at the core and trying to balance our own personal goals as well as the organizational goals. So those tools are really helpful, and we are going to take it further and hopefully learning furthermore in that area. And I assume with the experience of working with Seva members, Imago team has also helped the Seva Bharat teams and started working with the leaders there. So I think I'd like to end that. First of all, congratulations. And I'm sure the book would help many, many such members like us. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
Congratulations again, Isabel, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I was going to structure with my comments with three things: why I love the book, why I love Imago, and why I love Isabel. So maybe I'll start with why I love Isabel first. I think I met Isabel unfortunately far too recently when I listened to Rima Ben talk. I wish I had sort of been part of the magic much earlier. I met Isabel when I was working at another foundation, and we were supporting both Seva Bharat in setting up, in sort of tackling the problem of scale, and working with NRLM, the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, which is a large program organizing 80 million women into collectives to solve the problem of scale. How do you scale up livelihoods and income opportunities, as well as social and economic empowerment? And there, trying to identify models, and somehow I met Isabel, who just said, Rudy is the one that we need to do, and then sent me all the papers. I think I met your evaluation team first, and I met Michael. And then I think at the third or fourth meeting is when I met Isabel, and I thought, where has she been? How have I missed meeting this, her enthusiasm and her vast knowledge kind of left me breathless. And I thought, this is someone to work with, because I think she has such a broad sweep of the field, but also such a deep understanding of both the strengths as well as challenges of grassroots organizations and grassroots women's groups, and how one not just creates jobs and income opportunities, but does it in a way that empowers the women, empowers the communities, but also builds out the collectivization that's needed, because for the poor, collectives are one of the most important assets, network, social security, whatever we want to call it. So I think that's when I met Isabel, and that journey for a very few years has been very rich. As you've heard from Isabel, what they have managed to sort of start seeding across not just one state, but multiple states, and taking some of these lessons and some of the models out into the world. So I think I love Isabel for those reasons of just going so deep into into solving these problems and being extremely courageous with every level of challenge that the work entails. Because I think it's, when we read the book and when we attend courses on scaling up, you just look at an S curve and you say, okay, you go like this, you take an innovation, and of course the impact goes down, and then you get to some tipping point, and it's in the book, you find the most minimum viable intervention and you scale it up. But when you actually see it in practice in the workshops, in the work of Imago, it's not so simple. It is highly, not just complex, it is highly confusing. It requires collapsing all of your ideas about scale, structure, enterprise. Everything that we read in the traditional economics literature has to be unlearned. And everything that we assume about grassroots social enterprises or grassroots women has to be put outside the room, because that space that is created where one is actually tackling these questions of not just scaling, but actually just understanding how enterprises work and how do you build in social goals, how do you build in economic goals, how do you build in business goals into this mixture is the magic of, I think, Isabel and of this book and of Imago. So that's my first point, why I love Isabel, because I think she inspires me to sort of think very deeply, even as we want to go very broad. Why I love the book is, I think scale, the problems of scale has been one of the, I would say, biggest challenges of the development sector in the last decade and a half. I think we have taken multiple sort of views of trying to define it as, is it about replication? Is it about taking a model and create? How do you take the effects that you see that you're able to create for a few to the many, right? That's what scaling is. And I think the whole question of, do we scale with government? Can markets scale things is something that I think an eternal debate. And I think what I love about this book is it says both pathways are equally important. Both pathways are critical. Do not be afraid of markets and do not be afraid of government, because both of them are your friend. And when you remove that fear and make them your friend, then they can help you sort of navigate that journey to scaling up. I love the book. There's many pages that I have read an electronic copy of, so I can't remember the page numbers, but anyone who wants to reach out, I will share screenshots with you. But on the government side, why do we love scaling up with government so much? Because there is no impact like government. And what Imago and Seva are doing in terms of scaling the Rudy model is a really great exemplar of that, right? You are taking a policy opening that has been created. Government is invested in creating groups of women. Government has created funds and resources that are available for building social enterprises, but government itself cannot always be generating the models of what is it that would work. So Seva, of decades of work, has created this really beautiful model of, and I was sitting with Gayatri sort of trying to understand if one enterprise can create work opportunities for 200 women or more. And so if you have, that's the first, the bottom of the S as we try to sort of understand scaling. But I think we have to imagine what that looks like as you scale, as you build strength, as you build capacity, as you build greater sort of market opportunities and market structures. So I think that what government makes possible is sort of irreplaceable. And I think this model we're looking for, I think there are lots of examples from BRAC, from other countries. Even Pratham has sort of worked in terms of scaling with government. So I think pick up the book and understand what that means and what it means to sort of leverage a policy opportunity and do that diligent work of really opening that entry point and then bringing in the right kinds of capacities, the right kinds of technical partners, the technical excellence. I would say Seva is not just a technical partner, it's an ocean of wisdom and an ocean of understanding of grassroots women. To translate that into a particular intervention is not needed, but I think one has to have the discipline of figuring out how another system works and how do we take something that works for a group of women, a enterprise, to actually many. And that is the also the beauty of grassroots enterprises. I think one of the things I found working in the development sector is it is always open. There is never a closed-minded development sector person you'll meet. I think all of us get asked this question, how do we remain optimistic? Because we don't have a choice. We want to, our responsibility is to be optimistic about change and about the transformation that we're talking about. And the last one is about why I love Imago. And I think there are, I think when I met Isabel and sort of started understanding Imago, I kind of could see the role that it was filling. And that role was, you have incredible models that are deep grassroots, that are very, very dear to the organizations that have built them. And then you have this huge need of the rest of the country, of lots of women like them, lots of poor who are seeking those opportunities, and many, many programs have failed. So who's bridging that, right? Who's going to bridge that, and how are you going to take the lessons? Because it's not just that you take an enterprise model like a blueprint from Seva and go put it into another geography, right? So that intermediation, that bridging, that building of deep the model itself and understanding what dimensions of it are generalizable, giving, us as, organizations that are interested in building women's social enterprises, the confidence that this is something that one can test, and giving you the confidence that failure is not an endpoint, that failure is just one more step, and that you fail quickly, you fail fast, you move on, you sort of try another thing, something else, right? And I think that idea of working in a way that your competitors become your collaborators, and working in a way that brings both the science and the art, I would say the poetry of scaling, since our moderator said she has a PhD in poetry. I think scaling is not just a blueprint or a graph one looks at and then says, okay, 20 years later, there's a tipping point and then the scale has happened. I think giving ourselves and organizations the courage that going on this path that is non-linear, that is unpredictable, but there is a science one can bring to it, that you can continuously learn. And that's where adaptive evaluation becomes such a critical part of that journey of scaling up. Evaluation is not something that just lives outside and that you just come and do a baseline and endline. And adaptive evaluation is really that navigational support that any program needs, and that scaling up for sure needs. And it needs the kind of expertise that you have to bring from the doers, the grassroots women, and not necessarily the experts sitting in the corridors of wherever, to actually understand, like, what are those points of failure? What are those points? What are the progress markers of understanding scale? What are the progress markers of understanding enterprise success? And what really matters? And I'll make one last point and sit down, I can go on. But I think one of the biggest learnings that I had on the scaling up sort of conversations with Isabel, and that is in the book also, is when it comes to social enterprises, which are at that intersection of creating value as well as wealth for women at the grassroots, you'll find lots of recommendations that it's actually capital that matters most, or that markets matter the most. And I think Isabel's dogged sort of, and probably lots of debates that we've also sort of engaged in very creatively, is it's not those two that matter the most. It's what Seva has given to Seva's women, that psychological capacity, that agency, that ability to make decisions, negotiate, to actually have the gumption and heart to say, look, I'm going to try a business. I mean, if you were to ask me, would I set up a business? I don't think I have the courage to do it at all. So I think I like organizations, I need my salary, right? This is this very middle class way of thinking. So I think we have to really unlearn our own mental maps and really think, where is Imago and where is this book sort of really operating? And it's really operating in those spaces of precarity, where social security, where economic opportunities, social social sort of solidarity, all of those things are really very, very minimally available. And so in that context, social enterprises become so critical because you don't have big investors going to grassroots women and saying, here's 5 crores, go start your startup. That's not happening, right? And so I think the beauty of this is really figuring out how to understand what is it that works for the grassroots and being patient to learn and try and fail and then succeed along the way. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Yamini Ben Atmavilas from Udayti Foundation. Thank you, Smita Ben Bhatnagar from Seva. So I think between Isabel and Rima Ben and Yamini and Smita, we have a very good understanding. And for our students, I believe now you can see what I was saying in the beginning, that while this is happening in the area of development and scaling up development organizations, but this has applications everywhere, whether you are planning to get into commercial organizations or policy making or small and medium enterprises or startups, and in every ecosystem, these learnings will be great. So I'm expecting a lot of questions from the audience, from students in particular, and also यहाँ सेवा के बहुत members हैं, तो if it's okay with both of you, questions Hindi, Gujarati, English किसी में भी पूछ सकते हैं. I'm sure there are enough of us here to translate for Isabel. आप हिंदी बोलते हैं कि नहीं बोलते? अरे
No, don't worry. I'll translate both
You
Gujarati
spent so
and
many years in India, कुछ हिंदी गुजराती सीख लीजिए. But we will translate. Tana,
Sure,
you
sure,
can translate.
absolutely,
तो हिंदी में, English में, गुजराती में, students and Seva members and anyone, please.
હા આટલા બધા આપણે સેવામાંથી બહેનો છે અહીંયા આગળ, કોઈને કંઈ પૂછવું હોય, કોઈ ઇઝાબેલ જોડે કંઈક જાણવું હોય તો તમે પૂછી શકો છો. ઓફકોર્સ હું એમને મારે ટ્રાન્સલેટ કરી આપીશ. Any of our students who would like, yeah.
May I?
Of course.
Thank you. Well, congratulations for organizing this excellent program, and congratulations for the book as well.
Thank you.
Scaling up is never easy, even in a industry. Developmental scaling up in a developmental area must be more difficult, I'm sure. Since I am from an industry background, I try to look at this from an industry point of view. In industry, when we say scaling up, growth alone is not scaling up if your market share has remained same. Because the market is growing, you are retaining your market share, and in the process you are increasing your sales. It's not scaling up. But scaling up is if you are going for forward integration or backward integration, or you are opening absolutely new markets, then it is scaling up. How do you correlate that with developmental work? That was first question. And second question was, in a industry, there are quite a few challenges in scaling up, but one of the challenges is replicating or multiplying the processes, the checks and balance system within the proven operations. And checks and balances should be such that it improves the operational transactional efficiency. It should not be, as it is said in government, that checks and balances are perfect, nothing works. It's so perfect that nothing works. Not in that sense, but in an industry, it should improve your transaction efficiency while retaining your overall principles and goals. What are the critical success factors for scaling up in developmental area?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, can you tell us your name, please?
I'm Nitin Shukla.
Mr. Shukla.
Great question, and I'm very happy that you asked the question. So the way that we think about scaling for development is very similar to what you're saying, but through a different angle, which is, yes, you have to increase your efficiency in order to be able to scale. But instead of thinking of market share, the way that we explain it in the book is that your expenditures have to go up less than the speed at which your revenue is going up. So growth would be just revenues and expenditures going up sort of in parallel. Scaling is when your revenues become much higher than the growth of your costs. And that's when you have the capital to be able to invest and to be able to really scale. Saying it's increasing the market share is, I think, a different way of saying the same. But in the context of development, market share would not make that much sense, because much of what we do in development is not in the market. It's about this bigger goal. So that's the way that we come to terms with bringing the two together. And the efficiency point is absolutely necessary, whether you are in government or you're in the private sector. Without increasing, and in Rudy this is very much the case, without increasing the cost efficiency of what you're doing, a government cannot really scale far. That's an essential part of being able to get further.
Right, thank you. We had a question to the side. Do we have more questions?
Ma'am,
Yes.
my name is Astha, and my question was that you mentioned that the organizations need to know if they need to scale up the system or they need to change the system in order to scale up. So could you please brief us on how the organizations could identify those gaps in the systems?
Another great question. We do this, and we also explain it in the book. We start by doing a map of the system with the organization. So the organization that wants to scale up, we ask them who is at the center. Let's say Pratham, it would be the child that needs to learn, or Sewa, it would be the woman who's a Sewa member. So we first start by putting that, or getting the clarity from the organization, who is at the center, who's the ultimate beneficiary or customer that you want. And then we ask them, think about all the stakeholders that are that matter here, and then list them all and see who are the most influential. Choose those influentials and then start to map them in this system. Who needs what from whom? Because systems is about relationships. You know, they usually say, where I sit is where I stand, which means that sometimes it doesn't depend on a person what your position is, but it depends on where you are in that system. So we map those relationships, and then we look for, okay, if you want to scale, what are the breakdowns that are going to happen? We try to map that. You never get to know fully a system, but at least you do a simulation of where would that be. And if there are a lot of challenges, we try to find alternative pathways to scale or leverage points to scale. But sometimes you realize through these exercises that you really need changes that are beyond the organization, be it policies or it could be changes in the way that people see things, changing the mental models. And therefore, you need to start thinking about how do you bring about those changes? Who do you need to bring as a partner to be able to bring those changes? And then think about that scaling journey in a much wider context than what you thought it was initially. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a
I think we
question in
can
the
do-
back.
Yes, there's one more, and then Ravi, how are we on time?
Hello.
5-10 minutes? Okay, yeah.
Hi, ma'am. So my question was that as a business student, when we talk about scaling up, we always think about huge corporations and huge multinational companies and such. And you coming from an organization like the World Bank, what made you realize that the scaling up needs to be started from a grassroots level organization, and these are the organizations that are to be identified to build this to have a scaling up development impact?
Great question. what made me realize, so we had a lot of projects where you needed to get results that involve changes in behavior. For example, you could build schools, but if the teachers didn't show up, you could not really change that. Or if the children went to school and they didn't learn how to read and write by 3rd or 4th grade, how did you tackle that? Or if you were trying to work on eliminating open defecation, it was not just a matter of bringing infrastructure. You needed to bring the community together to understand that collectively. Or if we were working on HIV/AIDS, the whole issue of the stigma in the community was something that you could not do from the top down. And then meeting a lot of organizations from the grassroots which were solving these problems of behavior that could not be solved from the top, but were unable to scale. So that was the motivation from working in the World Bank, from being frustrated with how did you get children to read and write by the time. It was not just about having teachers, it was not just about building schools, and all these problems which we call behavioral problems that are not that easy to change.
So in that sense, really grassroots level institutions play a very important, significant role.
Very important, and they're working with the community, and it is the community that will be able to help for those changes, and the community has to be convinced that it matters. Otherwise, nothing will happen.
Yeah, of course. Right. Yes.
Namaste. My name is Tejas. I'm from Seva.
minute, Ben.
First of all, a lot of congratulations.
Thank you.
So my question is, how do you see the role of technology in scaling up?
Hugely important. We are able to solve development problems today that we never dreamt were possible. There's a malaria vaccine that has been discovered. So technology can really help, but it's not a magic bullet. Think about a vaccine. A vaccine can be invented, a malaria vaccine has been invented, but then there's a whole process, a whole value chain that needs to happen for the vaccine to get into the arms of the children and of the people that need it. And it also needs the confidence, as we saw during COVID. It's not just a matter of having the distribution system, it's also a matter of beliefs, of do people trust the government or they don't? And that's where community organizations during COVID, but also when you think about the efforts of eradicating polio, or the efforts, it's not that there was no vaccine, it's that you really need to get to the last mile. You need to get into a community that trusts that the government is doing the right thing. So it's much more than just technology. The technologies, I mean, there's so many technologies that are helping us to jump, but they are not the final solution.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. We have a lady there.
Yes.
નમસ્તે, મારું નામ કપિલાબેન છે. હું આણંદ જિલ્લાના રાષ્ટ્રોલ ગામમાંથી આવું છું. હું પોતે એક ખેતમજૂર બેન છું અને 23 વર્ષથી સેવા સાથે જોડાયેલી છું. એટલે મારે ખાસ એટલા માટે બતાવવું છે કે અમારી પોતાની કોઈ આમ વેલ્યુ નથી, પણ જ્યારે સેવાના સંગઠનમાં જોડાયા, સંગઠન કરતા ગયા, ત્યારે અમને ખબર પડી કે બહેનોને સાની સાની જરૂરિયાત છે. જ્યારે પોતાની કંપની, અમારી પોતાની એક શ્રમજીવી બહેનોની જ્યારે કંપની ખુલી, ત્યારે અમને થયું અને અમને અહેસાસ થયો કે અમે પણ એક કામદાર તરીકે અમારી પોતાની કંપની થાય છે એમ. અને એ કંપનીની અંદર એવું નહીં કે મોટા મોટા લોકો હોય, બધા બહારના દુનિયાના મોટા મોટા લોકોની કંપની હશે ને એમની ઓળખાણ હશે, પણ એક શ્રમજીવી બહેનનું નામ કંપની સાથે જોડાઈને આગળ લઈ જવું એ અમારા માટે બહુ જ મહત્વનું હતું. એટલે ખાસ મારે એ જ બતાવવાનું છે કે એક શ્રમજીવી બહેનની કંપની જ્યારે ખુલે અને એક ઉત્પાદક અમે પોતે, એના માલિક પણ અમે પોતે અને મેનેજર પણ અમે પોતે, એટલે અમારા માટે તો બહુ અગત્યની વાત છે કે ખેતમજૂરી કરતી બહેનનું આટલું મોટું વર્ચસ્વ વધારવું એ સેવાના સંગઠનની તાકાતથી અમે લોકો આટલા આગળ વધ્યા છે. અને તમે ગર્વથી કહી છે કે અમારી બહેનોની જ્યાં પણ તકલીફ થાય છે ત્યાં અમારી પોતાના કંપનીના અમે પોતે માલિક છીએ, એટલે ગમે તેવી મુશ્કેલી હોય તો અમે બહેનો સાથે તૈયારીમાં અમે પહોંચી જઈએ છીએ. અમે ખાલી એકબીજાને મળી લઈએ છીએ કે શું સમસ્યા છે અને એની સાથે અમારા બહેનોનું અમે એમના જીવનમાં રોજગારીનું આગળ વધારવા માટે અમે પ્રયાસો કરી રહ્યા છે. બીજું ખાસ એ કંપની સાથે મારે બતાવવું છે.
બેન, એક જ
સિંગલ મિનિટ એકદમ તમે તો સુપરફાસ્ટ ટ્રેન ચલાવી. હું જરા એમને સમજાવી દઉં તમે અત્યાર સુધીમાં શું બોલ્યા. She is saying that for a lot of women when it meant something to become a part of Seva, because otherwise they said we felt like we were nothing, but to belong to a company, the concept of a company for them, collective, that is very important. And she says there is such a sense of collective with Seva that if anybody needs any help, if there is anybody who needs support, they all come together, and that is why this initiative for them has been extremely rewarding in many ways. બોલો.
એટલે ખાસ એટલા માટે બતાવવું છે કે જ્યારે ખેડૂત ઉત્પાદન કરે છે ત્યાંથી લઈને જે બેન પોતાના ઘરમાં જ્યારે જમવાનું બનાવે છે ત્યાં સુધીની કેટલા બહેનોની રોજગારી મળી રહે છે એ અમારી કંપનીની અમે અંદર આખું એ રિલેઝ કર્યું છે કે જ્યાં ઉત્પાદન કરે છે તો ત્યાં એ ખેડૂતના ઘરે અમે બેઠા સામાન લઈએ છીએ એટલે એનો ટ્રાન્સફર ખર્ચ દલાલી અને એનો એ ગ્રેડનો સામાન હોય તો એને બજારના ભાવે એને પૂરતો ત્યાં આગળ એના ઘરે રોજગારી મળી જાય છે.
એક જ મિનિટ બેન. So she's saying that the process, we're eliminating people in between. So, they're getting to experience the entire process of actually, getting the produce from the farmers to doing, and for them that is very, very important.
ત્યાંથી એમનો માલ ખરીદી અમે અમારા પ્રોસેસિંગ સેન્ટરમાં લાવીએ છીએ. ત્યાં અમારા બહેનો જે પેકેજિંગ કરે છે અને સાફસૂફ કરે છે તો એમને પણ ત્યાં રોજગારી મળે છે.
So everybody is getting employment. Yes. It's all women driven, women centric, women being a part of the process, which makes them feel very important.
અને ત્યાંથી અમારા બહેનો જે લઈ અને ગામડા સુધી લઈને જાય છે તો એમની પણ રોજગારી મળે છે. ને એમાં કેવું કે સભ્યની આધારિત અમે પેકેજ બનાવીએ છીએ. 5 રૂપિયાનું પણ મળે, 10 રૂપિયાનું મળે અને 20 રૂપિયાનું પણ અને કિલોમાં પણ મળે. તો એવા ભાવ પ્રમાણે અમે અમારા પેકેજિંગ અમારા સભ્યને ધ્યાનમાં રાખીને બનાવીએ છીએ.
સરસ. Thank you, Ben.
થેન્ક યુ.
We should finish, huh? 5:20.
Yeah, she was just telling us about the process and the fact that Seva, has facilitated this
The roadie.
setup. Yes,
the
this
roadie
growth
setup.
and it gives them a lot of sense of importance.
Yeah, wonderful, good. I think we're on time. No?
Yeah. Should we one last question? Okay. એક છેલ્લો પ્રશ્ન અને પછી.
No, but we have to finish because.
Oh yes, you have to run.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Namaste, my name is Rashmika. I am from Mahesana district. I am weaving workers. My village name Lynch, and I am working with Seva from last 10 years. I am proud of you. I am part of Seva, and I am Seva. We are Seva.
Right.
તો સેવા દ્વારા અમને ઘણી બધી એવી તાલીમો મળી છે. સેવા મેનેજમેન્ટ સ્કૂલ દ્વારા તો અમે ઘણા અલગ અલગ રાજ્યોમાં અમે 8 લાખ બહેનોને એવી તાલીમ આપી છે અલગ અલગ વિષયો ઉપર. અને જે પોતાના જીવનમાં પોતાના ધંધા રોજગારમાં જે નાની નાની બાબતો આપણને લાગે છે પણ એ બહુ મોટી વાત છે. અને એ જે વિષયો ઉપર જે તાલીમ લે છે એ પોતાના જીવનમાં વ્યવસાયમાં ખૂબ જ ઉપયોગી છે. એવી અમે તાલીમો પણ આપીએ છીએ અને આ એમના રોજગારમાં પણ ખૂબ જ ઉપયોગી થઈ જાય છે. તો આવી અમે તાલીમો પણ આપીએ છીએ અને આવી જે મોટી મોટી યુનિવર્સિટી છે, સ્કૂલ છે, એમાંથી આપણને શિક્ષણ સારામાં સારું શિક્ષણ મળે અને એને ડિગ્રી મળે. તારા એ ટીચર કે પ્રોફેસર મોટા બની શકે છે પણ અમારા સેવા દ્વારા
મોટું નથી બેન. અહીંયા
અમારા સેવા દ્વારા જે અમને મતલબ કોઈ ડિગ્રી નહીં પણ અમને પહેલા અમારો હાથ પકડે, અમને ના આવડે તો મતલબ 1 વર્ષ સુધી શીખવાડા અને એ છોડી નહીં દેતા કે અમને નહીં આવડતું ચલો તમે કાલથી ના આવતા. પણ એ શીખવાડા પછી અમે જે તૈયાર થઈએ છીએ ને તો જેમ કોલસાના ઘસી ઘસીને મતલબ હીરો બનાવે છે ને એમ અમને ઘસી ઘસીને જે સેવાએ એ હીરો બનાવ્યો છે. અને એ હીરો પછી જે ચમકે છે ને તો એનો જે પ્રકાશ છે ને હું બસ ટૂંકમાં જ કહી જે પ્રકાશ છે ને આખા વિશ્વમાં જો ફેલાય અને અમારો સેવા જે છે નિરંતર ચાલે. અને અત્યારે હાલ જે ટેકનોલોજી મતલબ મોબાઈલ છે, કોમ્પ્યુટર છે, જે ટેકનોલોજી સાથે આપણે ચાલવાનું છે તો અમે પણ એ શીખી રહ્યા છે. ટેકનોલોજી બધી શીખી રહ્યા છે. અને અત્યારે હાલ તમે લોકો જે મતલબ ઇંગ્લિશમાં વાતો કરતા તમે ક્યારના જોઈ રહ્યા છે કે અમે ઇંગ્લિશ પણ શીખીએ. તમે ઇંગ્લિશ શીખવાની પણ શરૂઆત કરી છે અને એ હું ઇંગ્લિશ અત્યારે હાલ અમે બધા શીખવાની કોશિશ કરી રહ્યા છીએ અને બહુ જલ્દી શીખી પણ લઈશું.
સરસ. હવે છે ને આમને જવાનું છે હવે એટલે આપણે
સેવાને અમે નિરંતર રાખવા માંગીએ છીએ કે નિરંતર એ ચાલતી જ રહે. થેન્ક યુ સો મચ. જય સેવા.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much everyone for your questions. Thank you. आपके सवालों ने तो पूरा माहौल बदल दिया. And रीमा बहन के आपको सुन के अच्छा लग रहा होगा कि आपके ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में इतनी ज़्यादा बॉन्डिंग है. Thank you for everything. Okay, we are running out of time, but we have a very important last part of the event, which is of course the unveiling of the book. So as Isabel Ben said, the book is not yet commercially available. It will be available in a couple of weeks' time, I believe. So we will be able to get the book. We will try and get a few copies for our library and for our bookstore. So we should be able to access the book in a few days' time, I believe. But until then, there are some manuscript copies. Yeah, so can I invite Reema Ben, Yamini Ben, and the co-authors, Siddhant and Josie, and Debashi is the designer, the artist. Have I missed anyone? No, that's all. So you can come all in front of the chair. So yeah, in a row there. Yeah. Okay, because Isabel Ben has to leave in a couple of minutes, so a final thank you to all of you to come here on a Saturday afternoon, much appreciated. Thanks, of course, to Seva for coming up with the idea of launching the book on our campus. Thanks to Professor Pankaj Chandra, who's not here today, but who agreed to it and got the ball rolling on this event. And of course, thanks to Isabel and Tana for an insightful conversation. And last but not least, the student volunteers you see on the side, Astha, Jinay, and Shruti, they put together an army of students to make this happen. All I had to do was just tell them an event has to be done, and they did it. We didn't have to do anything. So thank you, volunteers. If any further reward for coming today is needed, the talk itself was a reward, but if any further reward is needed, as you step out of the auditorium, there's some tea, coffee and snacks on the left side of the auditorium door. Yes, yeah, can we say that in Gujarati?
બધા જે લોકો સેવામાંથી આયા છે બધા બહેનો પ્લીઝ બહાર ચા છે ચા અને નાસ્તો છે પ્લીઝ કરીને જજો.